Yes.
Okay, great. So we're going to just continue on in our understanding of organizational structure. And today we're going to actually apply some of the stuff that we learned last class, and we're going to get a chance to draw out what the ideal structure will be for several situations and talk about the advantages and disadvantages of organizational structure. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Okay, great. So from last class, can you do you remember what the term organizational structure is? What does it mean?
The hierarchy of a structure within an organization.
Yeah, that's right. So it's basically how the organization is structured and who reports to who. And as you said, it's like the hierarchy. So as I said, we're going to talk about different ways for hierarchy, but I thought I'd start with a comic. It's a Dilbert comic that you enjoy.
Okay.
You didn't laugh very much. Anyway, so maybe just reflecting on organizational structure and why it's important. Can you have a sense of why you think it's important to understand what the structure is for a company if you work in that company?
Yep, so people understand who they're reporting to, who they're accountable to, and where they're sort of a line of structure in terms of where they're going.
Yeah, so I think that's exactly right. You want to know where you're going in terms of promotions and who you're accountable to. And also what we'll learn is that also how the entire company is oriented. Because based on different structure, they can be oriented different ways. So last class, we talked about the various types of organizational structure. And we talked about functional structure, divisional product structure, divisional geographic structure, and matrix structure. Today, we're not going to focus on matrix structure just given the time. But do you remember from last class what functional structure is?
Yeah, I think so. It's just where different functions are reporting into the president of the company.
So what would be an example of a function?
The chief financial officer reports, who's responsible for the accounting and reporting, would be reporting into the president.
That's great. Another function would be another function.
Marketing and sales.
Yeah, perfect. So it's just specialties.
Right.
What about divisional product structure? Can you give an example of what that would be?
Yeah, so different heads of different organizations that would be responsible for a certain product. Apples, oranges, whatever. So it would be aligned by different products, and each of those individuals reported to a president.
Perfect. And then the last one is divisional geographic structure. What would that look like?
So that's just geographic, and it's just having a region. So you're responsible for different regions, all these different people for different regions, and they all report into one individual.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so that's what we learned last class. And as I said, this class we're going to apply that knowledge and try out different organizational structures. So I'm going to give you 3 scenarios. And what I'd like you to do is reflect on the structures we just talked about. And what you think the ideal structure is for each scenario.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll talk about some pros and cons, and that's about it. So here's the scenario number 1. Determined never to shovel snow again, you are establishing a new resort business on a small Caribbean island. Sketch and name the organizational structure you would put in place for the 1 year the resort is under construction. Why did you choose this structure? So just during the construction phase, what would it look like for you? And put present at the top in a box, and then below it, just a line or so below it.
Okay, so we have one there, project manager. And let's say accountant or finance guy. And then maybe, what, year 1?
Yeah.
Maybe sales. There you go.
And what structure is that? What
Functional structure.
It's functional. That's great. And you pick those because those are the key functions in building the resort.
Right.
Perfect. And maybe the accountant would be finance, because maybe there'd be stuff with banking and, but it could be an accountant for sure. So that's great. Okay, so why don't we talk about the pros and cons of the functional structure then? Can you think of some advantages or disadvantages of that structure?
Advantages is just that they're reporting in, one person to report into. You've got all the different functions covered. Everybody knows their own responsibilities and their roles within the organization. And it's simple.
Yeah, it is pretty simple, and it's a simple time because you're building a resort.
Right.
I think you covered a lot of the advantages and disadvantages, but one of them would be, in terms of advantages, is functional economies of scales are maximized, so all the project managers in construction would be here, all the finance guys would be here, girls, all the sales and marketing. And then you'd have tight centralized control.
Right.
The disadvantages are you might have difficulty coordinating across functions because it's what it's like in terms of finance people talking to sales.
Right.
And then this is a key difference with this structure is that profit responsibility rests only with the president.
Right.
And I know in the first year you're not going to be profit, but no one else is really thinking along a profit and loss. They're only thinking about maximizing their functions.
Right.
Okay, so let me go to scenario 2. We're doing well. It's the same resort, you're the same guy. It's now 7 years later. Your resort has been wildly successful. Good for you. Club Ed owns 2 resorts in the Caribbean, 2 in Mexico, and 1 in South Pacific. The company also operates a cruise ship that sails throughout the Caribbean. Sketch a name, the organizational structure, and explain why.
Okay, so I'll do the president. And then we've got the Caribbean here. So general manager, Caribbean. Mexico. General manager. And South Pacific. And then you have the Caribbean cruise could be, let's put it here. Caribbean cruise guy here, right here.
And
There you
what kind of structure is that?
Geographic.
Geographic. Great. And I think that's very credible because you've got the 5 resorts and they're organized by geography. That's terrific. Can you think of some advantages or disadvantages of this kind of structure?
Well, they're running them independently of each other essentially. So each GM there is responsible for their own geographic region, their own P&L. So sometimes it conflicts with what the guy from Mexico will want versus what the guy from the Caribbean will want.
Yeah, so just like functionals might have conflict across the functions, these guys might have difficulty coordinating or conflicts across geographies.
Right.
Any advantages, other disadvantages or advantages?
No, it's just difficult to coordinate 3 different geographic regions, right, for the president. So he's got to coordinate it and quarterback it and get them aligned to the overall vision of the business.
Okay, and any advantages? What do you think about advantages?
They have their own P&L responsibility, so that's great.
That's a great one. Okay, so let me go through the advantages. You've grabbed a few. We didn't talk about the fact that because they're each focused on a specific region, they really are responsive to the customer and the regional economy. So that's really helpful. You've got a Caribbean expert and a Mexican expert. And they also allow for regional economies of scale. So, for example, purchasing and so forth, they're gonna coordinate by region. You got the duplication and cooperation across regions might be difficult. The cruise ship is interesting because you put it below the Caribbean, which I think makes a lot of sense because it's just floating around the Caribbean, and there's only 1 cruise ship. But you could see that it depends on the strategy for the cruise ship. If it's just 1 cruise ship, it's always the Caribbean. It probably makes sense there. But if you had a different, higher strategy for it and you want to expand it, you might actually have it report directly to the president in terms of line of sight.
Right.
So it depends on your strategy. Okay, so let's do scenario 3. We're just ticking along here. It's now 10 years later. The club has 112 resorts and 3 cruise ships in North, Central, and South America. Congratulations. There's also an active merchandise division, which is 15% of sales, with Club Ed products sold at the properties and online.
Right.
Sketch a name, the organizational structure, and explain why.
Okay, so I'll have the president. So the club has 3 cruise ships. So we could do it by, I'm going to do it geographic. We're going to put the cruise ships here. And then I'm going to go geographic as well. North Central and South America. And then I will also do somewhere the product and merchandise person will be somewhere in here too.
Okay, so in the structures that I explained,
Yeah.
which one is this?
This is geographic, but you also have a product piece here too.
And where's
Oh no, sorry, you don't. This is just geographic. With cruise just being slightly different, but it's floating around. We can give it a region.
And what about the products, the merchandise?
Well, I can have that centralized up here in terms of supporting all of this. North, Central, and South America, if I want to have a product merchandising division.
And
Or
how
I
about the
could
cruise
have
ship?
it all underneath these guys.
Okay, so, sorry, you're thinking that this is a geographic structure.
Yeah, I'm sticking to the geographic.
Okay, and that the cruise and the products you think are not that important, or...
No, you're going to have a general manager under the cruise piece, but I treat it as a region of where it's going.
Okay. Okay, so I think that's a credible plan. It's not purely a geographic structure
No.
because you've got the cruise ship, which is kind of like a product, and you've got your products, which is also a product.
Right.
The advantages and disadvantages of your structure would be the same as we talked about before, but a different way to think about this would be a product structure.
Right.
So you basically have resorts, cruise, and merchandise reporting into the president. And then under resorts, you have the geographies below that.
Fair enough, yeah.
And that way you could actually focus on the 3 different products or services that you're offering, and it's not as mixed, and you don't sort of say, well, products are just here and cruise is
Right.
just here. It's a cleaner structure.
Okay.
So and as I said, one is not necessarily right or the wrong, it's
Right.
just what you think makes sense. So let me go through the advantages and disadvantages of the product structure. Any sense of, if you did do the product structure with the resort, cruise, and merchandise, what some advantages and disadvantages might be?
Some advantages. Well, I mean, it's easy. The merchandising guys responsible for merchandise is very clear. Resorts responsible for North, Central, and South America. You could have actually geographic under the resort person.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then the cruise person is, well, it's only 3 ships. It's kind of small, but it would be on its own too. It's very different than the other one. So that's how it's separated. It's fine. That would be the advantage. Clarity in terms of their roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. Well, actually, every structure has clarity.
Yeah.
So the geographic structure has clarity. The functional structure has clarity. This has clarity on the products.
Yep.
But they all would have that advantage of clarity. Any advantages specific to this structure, so a product structure, or disadvantages?
I just sometimes think of product structure in this thing as when you got different regions around the world, and you're worried about the products. I'm not sure if that's going to work that well, because you almost want to give each region their own autonomy in terms of how they develop products for that region.
Yeah. Okay. So you're actually thinking that across regions is really important, and the product stuff gets in the way.
Could
And
be.
so you're saying that maybe in this structure, the coordination across the product groups might be tough.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one disadvantage, and duplication and lack of cooperation across product groups.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other typical disadvantage is that it requires product managers to be knowledgeable globally, which
Right.
is tough. Like
Yep.
imagine the resort guy that's here, he has to know everything about resorts around the world, and that's really hard. Same with the merchandise person. But advantages, you allow each product group to focus on specific customer needs,
Okay.
because resorts are very different than cruise ships. And it helps managers develop deep expertise in the product.
Okay.
Okay, so we've gone through 3 scenarios and 3 different types of structures. I thought I would just try to give you a quick true-false recap to see how well this is stuck with you. The first question is, the divisional geographic organizational structure is typically the most appropriate to use because it has the fewest disadvantages. Is that true or false?
False.
Yeah, because
Who knows?
right? You can't just say one's the best to use all the time. It depends on the situation. Number 2, one of the biggest disadvantages of the functional organizational structure is that profit responsibility rests solely with the CEO.
True.
Yeah, we went through that. That's one of the
Yeah.
big things. Number 3, the divisional product organizational structure requires product managers to be knowledgeable globally.
True.
Yeah, we just went through that.
Yeah.
And then finally, no matter the structure chosen, coordination across division groups can be challenging.
True.
Yeah, so that's great. So we covered all that. What I'd like you to do is just at the end before I wrap up, I want to talk about next week. So next week we're going to continue about organizational behavior and go more into the culture of organizations.
Okay.
But just wrapping up this, could you think about a job that you've held, a full-time job, and was it evident to you what the organizational structure was?
No. Didn't care about it. I just worried about my job.
I think that's pretty typical, particularly if it was a summer job or you're new.
Yeah.
And based on thinking about this, can you see how maybe understanding what the organizational structure might be of some advantage?
Yep. Can see where I can get my next job.
Yeah, where you get promoted and stuff. Well, thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.
Okay.
Bye.